When should you walk away from a home purchase? Sometimes, even with a great deal, it's still the best decision. A client of mine recently found what seemed to be a great property in a great location at a great price. And it really checked all of the boxes for what my client was looking for. But after further inspection, literally the home inspection, we uncovered some serious issues which led me as her agent to recommend that she walk away from this property. And that's what I want to spend a little bit of time talking about in today's video. As someone who has a lot of videos online and people comment often on my videos asking, when should I walk away from a property? What things are deal breakers? Well, in today's video, I actually want to walk you through what I would consider deal breakers in property and what I, as a real estate agent and someone that buys homes, actually focuses on when going through the home buying process. Now, before we dive into that, I'd like to take a minute and ask a favor. If you're new to me, new to my channel, it's all about real estate, helping educate and guide you through that process. So if you find any value today, do me a favor and hit that thumbs up. And if you want to stay updated on content like this, do me a favor and subscribe to the channel. Now, there's one thing I really want to stress in this video. The issue that we found came up because we had a home inspection. And you'll often hear me say, as a real estate agent and a YouTuber, someone out there putting out a lot of videos, you should never, ever, ever waive the home inspection when it comes to buying a property. I realize the last couple of years have been super competitive when it comes to putting an offer in on a home. A lot of times you're up against other bids, people are doing crazy things, and you have your back against the wall trying to make a decision on how to make your offer stand out. And the easiest way to do that is to offer more than the asking price and waive all of the contingencies, which could literally be setting yourself up for disaster. Now, for the right person with the right budget who absolutely doesn't care about the property because they're going to tear it down or remodel it entirely, then it might not be as big of an issue. But most of the home buyers that I deal with are first-time home buyers going through the process. They don't have a lot of money down outside of their down payment, and potentially coming up against high cost issues could be a really, really big problem. So if you are going through the home buying process, just understand the importance of the home inspection, because at the end of the day, it could end up saving you a lot of headaches and a lot of money. Now, before we talk about my client specifically, I want to address the question that I often get, and that's, what should I focus on when going through the home inspection? Like, what items are important versus which items aren't? And that's really a personal decision, because some people are really handy. I have contractors buying homes that don't care about any of the cosmetic stuff. They don't even care about the health and safety items. Whereas on the flip side, I have first-time home buyers that care about every single thing in the home inspection. So it's important to know your threshold, what you're comfortable with and what you're not. Now, typically what I like to tell clients is focus on location first, right? You can't change the location of the property. Everything else about the property can, in theory, be changed. Now, sometimes in a homeowners association, you can't change certain things, but what I'm talking about mainly is the location. You can't pick a house up and move it. Unless you're from North Carolina, where I am. I've actually seen them pick up houses and move them, but typically speaking, that's not something you can do. So assuming you love the location of the home, then you need to focus on the things that are important to you in the property. And to me, that typically comes down to high ticket items. And I like to focus on things like the roof of the property, because the roof does actually have a lifespan on it. And the closer you get to the end of that lifespan, typically speaking, the more issues you're going to have on that property. And to replace a roof can be anywhere from $10,000 to $50,000 to well over $100,000, depending on the property that we're talking about. And something that most buyers need to hear and understand is, just because something is old doesn't necessarily mean it needs to be replaced. And that's why it's important to have these inspections. And sometimes you want to get further inspections on top of the inspection. Your home inspector will typically inspect the property kind of as an overview, if you will, as a bird's eye view of everything in the property. And then if there's issues or things that they see wrong with, say, the roof or the HVAC system of that property, they're likely going to refer a specialist. You need to have a specialist come out and look at this. And that's when you get someone that solely focuses on roofs, solely focuses on heating and air conditioning units, because they can go a little bit further and tell you, yeah, it's a little bit older, but the roof's in really good shape, or this needs to be replaced, or what have you. So what I like to do is focus, like I mentioned a moment ago, on those high ticket items, starting with the roof. And then I move inwards to the property and start looking at things like I mentioned, the heating and air conditioning unit of that property. How old is the furnace of that property? How old are the condensers of that property? Are they maintaining the unit? On top of that, how often is that unit actually getting used? In areas where you get 4 seasons, the heating and air conditioning essentially runs almost year-round to some degree. Whereas here in Southern California, because we really only have one season and it varies just a little bit, you use your heater maybe 1 to 2 months out of the year, and here where I'm located, maybe your air conditioning 1 to 2 months out of the year. So those systems aren't running year-round, which means they're getting less use on them and likely have a longer lifespan than something in an area where it's getting used all the time. And that's where it's important to have that secondary inspection. Someone look at it if there's any questions about that particular unit. From the HVAC, I like to go in and look at the appliances of the property. Appliances typically stay with the property, and sometimes that can include the refrigerator. And when it comes to replacing these units, especially if they're built-in units, if it's a built-in oven or built-in stove or built-in refrigerator, these items can get very, very expensive. So you want to make sure they're in good working condition when you're buying that home. And from there, I would go to the water heater. Now, water heaters aren't really that expensive to replace, but they can run you a few $1,000s depending on the type of unit you have in that property. So you just want to make sure it's in good working condition, that everything is to code, so you don't have further issues down the road. From there, I look at the electrical panel. Does it have a newer electrical panel on the exterior? Does it have one on the interior? What kind of wiring is in that electrical panel? And then the last thing I would look at is plumbing when I'm looking at a property. Has the plumbing been replaced? Is it copper versus galvanized? Have they had slab leaks? Are there issues? Are there a lot of trees in the yard and maybe I need to check the sewer lines to see what the plumbing looks like there? So essentially that's what I would focus on as a buyer going into a property. Now here's what I'll say. When you hire a home inspector to inspect your home, there are going to be issues that come back. You're paying someone to find issues in that property. Therefore, they are going to find issues. The question is, are they real issues that pertain to the health and safety of the property? Something that is a serious issue like a slab leak or a cracked foundation, or is the house on the verge of falling down? Those are serious things versus cosmetic things that have changed over time, just codes that have changed, which typically aren't deal breakers when it comes to a home. But now I want to take it back to my client because my client was buying a smaller property. It was a 2-bedroom, 1.5 bath property that was somewhere around 1,000 square feet, and the kitchen had actually been remodeled at some point. But you could tell from the pictures that some things were done a little bit janky, and my client knew that from originally looking at the home. She knew that in her head she was already putting in $20,000 to $25,000 to repair this home, which in my opinion was probably on the high side, and to fix some of the things that they did improperly and to address some of the things that they didn't address when they did the original remodel. She was expecting to spend, like I said, somewhere between $20,000 and $25,000. That's why when she wrote her offer, she built in that buffer, if you will, to her price. And we ended up getting the property for about $27,000 under the asking price, which ended up being a good deal on that property. But there's one caveat. They countered us to buy the property as is because they were giving us a quote-unquote deal on this property because they didn't want to deal with any of the potential issues that came up. And because my client was already expecting to deal with this, she wasn't worried. So we had the home inspection, and when I originally walked into the property, I noticed a smell. It was kind of a musty smell, and I couldn't really get over it, and I kind of brought it up to the home inspector as I walked into the property. And he said, you know what, they have air fresheners actually plugged in. I think what you're smelling is the air freshener. And I said, yeah, maybe you're right. You know, maybe it is the air freshener, but something just didn't smell right in the property. And we proceeded along with the home inspection. And then when we got to the end of the inspection, which in this case was the kitchen, he noticed some mold under the sink. He noticed a black substance underneath the sink. And then it kind of continued where he took off the electrical panel, and the electrical panel was actually on a wall that sided to where one of the guest bathrooms was. And when he took off the electrical panel, he also noticed kind of a black substance on the wall, which brought up the question to me, should we be doing a mold inspection? And so my client had originally asked me when she was looking at doing the home inspection on the property, should I be getting a mold inspection on this property? And typically my answer is no, it's not usually necessary unless you notice something in the property, unless you notice a smell, unless you notice it in areas. You know, it's not really something that typically comes up. Well, in this case, we did notice that substance. There was a bit of an odd smell. So I made the executive decision to move forward with the actual mold inspection because my client wasn't at the property at the time. And so in this case, the home inspector actually tests the environment outside. He has a machine where essentially he sets it outside and gets a baseline of what the air looks like outside of the property. And then they bring that machine into the property. In this case, he brought it into the kitchen and did it in another area, kind of in a hallway that was in between the bathroom and the bedrooms, on top of those areas that actually showed the substance. And with all of that, here's the actual reason that I told my client to back out of that property and move on. And that's because the very next day we got that mold report back, and the levels were essentially off the charts when it came to normal levels. In fact, every single area that we tested actually showed up as mold, and every single one of those areas showed super high levels of mold. And as a real estate agent that's been in this business over 20 years, I've come across two separate issues where mold were a big issue in affecting the homeowners of those properties to the point where they had major health concerns. And for me, it's one of those areas that's very difficult to get past, because in both of those cases that I mentioned a moment ago, the houses were remediated. All the mold was supposedly removed when in fact there was still mold there, and it ended up causing long-term health issues for both of those clients. So for me personally, it was a non-negotiable, but it wasn't my decision. So I told my decision to my client, hey, I would recommend that you probably move forward with this property because there's already issues that you're aware of in the property, the cosmetic things that we can see. And now there's this unforeseen issue that we didn't know about that's likely going to end up being an even bigger issue. So my recommendation is that you move forward. And at that time, she told me, hey, listen, you don't know this, but my daughter actually had major health issues when she was younger because she lived in a property with mold, and it's been affecting her entire life. So in this case, we were both on the same page with thinking that she should cancel and move along to another property, which is exactly what we did. We canceled that property because of that issue. And if there's one thing I want you to take away from this video, is that all of that came about because we did an inspection up front. So by foregoing that inspection, not doing an inspection, you could be walking into a property that not only has issues you can see, but issues you can't see that could end up costing you more than money in the long run.